Hi pals, and welcome to a new video. I'm Kate, and today we're going to be doing something slightly different from my usual kind of book talk and book reviews, and that is a 6-month review of the Kobo Libra Colour. I bought mine back in February. I've had this for 6 months now. I've been using it weekly, kind of in that time. So I hope you find this review useful. When I was weighing up buying my Kobo, I found YouTube reviews really helpful. They were mainly kind of first impressions and unboxings, so I thought having used this for 6 months, a longer term review might be helpful to anyone out there who's thinking of buying one. Previous to owning my Kobo, I had a Kindle Paperwhite, and I have had Kindles probably for around 10 or 15 years. This is the first time I've ever had a Kobo. The way I'm going to do this is just run through some of the main points that I think are the most important things, and when it comes to the Kobo and as a comparison to the Kindle, and they are the e-reader itself, the Kobo Libra Colour, versus the Kindle Paperwhite, how intuitive this one is, how easy it is to use and how comfortable it is to read from. Is the colour version of the Kobo worth it? That was one of the things that I could not quite decide if kind of upgrading from the Clara to get the Libra Colour was worth the price. I'll talk about that as well. Is the stylus worth it, which is the little kind of pencil that you can choose to buy for annotating your Libra. Availability of titles on the Kobo store versus the Kindle store, and this one is a major one for me. And then Libby integration, if you're somebody who uses Libby and wants to integrate it into their e-reader. Just a little bit of background before we get started. Like I said, previous to having a Kobo, I've only ever used Kindles. I got my first Kindle in 2012, 2013, and I've had a Kindle ever since. I read from my e-readers really quite often, despite owning an awful lot of books, because I find the ease of reading from them and how comfortable they are really kind of good for me. I also read a lot of kind of classics, modern classics, and so they're readily available usually kind of on the Kindle store or the Kobo store as well. If I can get hold of an ebook version, even if I own that book in paperback, I'm always tempted to read it on my e-reader. I especially love it for winter evenings when there's not a lot of daylight and you don't have to faff around with lights, etc. You can just read it on your e-reader. I switched from the Kindle Paperwhite, although I've always had a fantastic experience with that. It was because it was looking a little bit old and worn. There were some issues with charging, although my mum's been using it successfully ever since I gave it to her. But this also came at the same time as Amazon announced that going forward, if you were to buy Kindle books, you would be locked into their system. So now when you buy a Kindle book, you can only ever read that on a Kindle, whereas previously you were able to kind of transfer that to different e-readers. What I did before I bought my Kobo was I transferred all of my previous Kindle books through my MacBook so I could have them on my Kobo. Like I said, you no longer have the option for that. Because my Kindle was on its last legs, I didn't like the idea of buying a new Kindle and then being locked into that Amazon ecosystem forever, because otherwise I would have to leave those books and start over. I also just don't kind of like that in general. So that's why I decided to switch to Kobo. It was only ever rarely, in terms of buying a new e-reader for me, a toss-up between Kobo and Kindle. I didn't really consider anything else. I'll just run through what I got in my order. So I ordered the Kobo Libra Colour in black, the stylus pencil to go with it, and then I got the stylus case in beige. I don't know why I got the case in beige, because I always destroy anything that is kind of white or off-white very quickly, so I don't recommend the beige case. Definitely go for something darker. In terms of comfort while you're reading, this really isn't too dissimilar from the Paperwhite. I'd say that they probably weigh about the same, and they feel kind of as comfortable as each other, which is fantastic. This is slightly bigger than the Paperwhite, however. There is a different model that Kobo do, which is the Clara, and that comes in black and white and colour. I got this one because I really wanted the physical buttons to turn the page, which are, if I put my coffee down right here, I had those on an old Kindle, and I love the act of physically pressing the buttons. So as soon as I saw that, I knew I wanted this model. If you're after something small and compact, the Libra might not be for you. You might be better with a Kindle Paperwhite or the Clara from Kobo. There's also a next model up from this which takes the annotation, note making capabilities in this to the next level. That is venturing into like a tablet for me. I already have an iPad. I don't want my e-reader to be a tablet. I don't really even want my e-reader to have easy access to the internet. I like being able to cross-reference things on Wikipedia or Google if needed, but I kind of want this locked down just for reading. Some of the most important features for me on any e-reader, and the Kindle did this fantastically, I would say slightly better than the Kobo, is I'm really particular because I read mainly at night in bed, say from 6 or 7 p.m. after I've had my dinner. I'll get into bed and read, but I'm really particular about artificial light in the evening because it has a really bad effect on your sleep. I always had my Kindle and always have my Kobo switched to dark mode, and I have the filter so that it's more natural light, and then I have the brightness turned right down. The brightness is turned up for this video so that it picks up on the camera, so any clips that you see, you will see quite a high brightness. I generally read at 2 or 3% brightness when I'm in bed, so the Kobo does that fine. I would say that there's less of a glare on the Kindle if I'm being honest, so that's something to kind of be aware of. Some people don't mind looking at a screen. I find that it really affects my eyes, and like I said, I don't want the artificial light for my sleep. First up, in terms of the e-reader itself, one of the main pros for me for the Kobo is that it's far less intrusive than the Kindle. You don't open the Kobo and go straight to the store like it does on a Kindle. You don't have adverts when your Kobo is sleeping either. When your Kobo is sleeping, it will default the screensaver to the last book that you're reading, and I have to say on the colour one this looks absolutely fantastic. Whenever it's sleeping and I can see the cover of a book on, I do always think that it looks absolutely wonderful. When you go to the home page, you will see your books, and then there's also links to Overdrive so you can see your most recent library holds. I currently have 2 books on hold from the library: The Peasants, which is like a 20th century Russian classic, and a history book by William Dalrymple on ancient India. You have the option to go into the store and buy books straight from your e-reader. I don't really tend to do this. I just generally use my iPad to purchase the books, but like I said, it's far less intrusive than the Kindle, where you're constantly being pushed books and constantly being advertised at, and usually they're books that you would never consider reading. So this really does feel like your own e-reader rather than something that Amazon kind of partly controls, and I think that this is like really such a big pro for the Kobo. Secondly, what I will also say is that this is just much more intuitive than the Kindle. There are a few things that just make this generally a better experience. Only small things, but they just improve it so much. When you're in a book reading, you can swipe down and see your most recent reads and kind of move between books effortlessly rather than having to go completely out and then come back in again. You can also increase or decrease the brightness by swiping up and down in the left-hand margin. One of my favourite features is that if you swipe up and like have a look at the menu icons, you can go into a graph that shows you how many minutes left you have in the current chapter, how many minutes the next chapter is, and kind of your overall progress. I love this because I have a thing where if I'm going to take a break from reading, I like it to be at the end of a chapter, so that this is just a nice way to kind of plan how long you have left in your reading time. You can change font size, margins, line spacing, like you can do in any reader. That's not too dissimilar from the Kindle. But I would say in terms of ease and use and this just being more intuitive to readers, this I would rate higher than any Kindle I've had before. A few cons about the Kobo though. First off, my Wi-Fi signal drops out really quite frequently, and it is kind of like an irritation. Recently I borrowed a book called The Siege from my library, which is about the siege of Leningrad in Russia during the Second World War. And there'll be a lot of place names I would just want to kind of check on Wikipedia just so I can kind of get a handle on the map of what was happening. My Wi-Fi signal was constantly kind of dropping out, so I couldn't always check them, or I'd have to go back into settings, go back into Wi-Fi, find my find the right one. It's just an irritation, and it happens all the time. I never had that problem with Kindle, and I know that it's a problem specific to the Kobo because my phone and everything else kind of in the house doesn't lose signal. It's even when I'm in the bedroom and the router is in the spare bedroom, which is literally right next to it. So I do think that it's an irritation, but I think it's pretty poor. What I will also say is that sometimes the Kobo can be a little glitchy. I did find that my Kindle would also crash every now and again, but as an example, I recently got a book through Kobo Plus, which I'll talk more about in a second, and for some reason, there was a certain point in that book when it just kept on crashing my Kobo every time I got to it. So like really irritating. It can be a little bit glitchy, and I've noticed it's mainly to do with the screen, and I do wonder if it's to do with kind of the capacity to keep the colour version going. I'm not too sure about that, but it is something to be aware of. As an e-reader, I think it's a much better, more intuitive system than the Kindle, but it's not perfect. Another thing to bear in mind is if, like me, you're manually transferring ebooks that you've had from somewhere else, when you transfer them over, everything works fine. If you want to annotate those books, it can be a little bit glitchy too, especially when you're trying to annotate across pages. So usually if you're starting an annotation and it goes across 2 pages, you just can kind of carry on and pull it over. You can't do that on books that you've manually transferred in yourself. One of the major selling points of the Kobo is all of the annotation that you can do, and I do like to highlight and annotate. I wouldn't say that I'm excessive with it, because I find that if you do it too much, it can disrupt the flow of what you're reading. But I do think that this is fantastic for that, especially if you're reading non-fiction, or I guess especially if you are like studying. One of the great things about the colour version is that you can annotate in different colours, which I genuinely use all of the time. I find that it makes the passages that I've annotated much more distinct from each other and makes them stand out. I also sometimes theme the colours so that when I'm kind of highlighting things, I will know what colour I'm looking for what theme. You should be able to see on screen, I've been reading The Gathering Storm by Winston Churchill. This is the first of his 6-volume history of the Second World War. This one's like 700 pages. I've been reading this since March, you should be able to see. And I've made so many annotations. I've made really good use of all of the different colours. I've also used my stylus to handwrite in notes on some of the pages as well. When I'm reading non-fiction, I will say that I do a lot more annotating than when I'm reading fiction. I generally, when I'm reading fiction, just tend to highlight passages. I like having the stylus pencil. I don't think I've used it as much as I thought I would. That is probably because I do have a commonplace book and I do have a journal. I find generally if I'm writing notes, I much prefer to write it down physically in those because my brain retains it a lot better. Kobo does have the function of like a notebook sections where you can create different notebooks, etc. and you can handwrite into them and then it can convert that into typed if you want it to. It's a great feature, but I'm really happy with the notebooks that I have, so I just don't find myself using it at all. If you want to use those, then probably the stylus pencil would be a really good idea, but I think maybe it's a little bit gimmicky. I also find for the size of the screen, you really have to manipulate the line spacing and the size of the margin to be able to write into books. You definitely can't write like full sentences. It's just the odd note here and there. I'm glad that I tried this. That would probably be the one thing I would change as opposed to the colour version. If I could do this again, I probably wouldn't order the pencil and I would just do it the old-fashioned way by highlighting with kind of like my finger and then writing in my notebook. So that's maybe something to take away from this. So is the colour version worth it? For me, I think it is because I am a big highlighter and I do like breaking it up in different colours. It stands out far more to me. If you're not a big highlighter of text, it's probably not really worth it. The covers do look fantastic when you open a book and when it's sleeping, but the vast majority of the time you will just be looking at black and white text on a screen. Like 99% of a book, it's going to be black and white. There is a big difference. So I think I paid £209 for just the e-reader, not including the stylus or the case. And I think the Clara black and white is about £129. So there is a big price difference. If you just want a run-of-the-mill e-reader, I probably wouldn't recommend getting the colour. If you do want it for extra annotation, study, or you just want the best e-reader for you, then I personally would get the colour. There are a few things I also think it's worth considering. The first one is Kobo Plus versus Kindle Unlimited. I'm a Kobo Plus member. That means I pay £8.99 a month for the Kobo Plus Reader subscription. I find that's cost effective for me. I was never a member of Kindle Unlimited because it's generally full of books that I honestly wouldn't consider reading, like mass market, like romance, and crime books that just really weren't for me. I have a list of some of the books I've managed to get hold of through Kobo Plus, the reader's subscription. The first one is The Gathering Storm by Winston Churchill, which you will have seen earlier. That's around like £12.99, I think, to buy a physical copy. The Crooked Cross by Sally Carson. That is a Persephone Books reissue, which I really want to read. If you want to buy that Persephone book, I think it's like £16-17. You might be able to find an older edition of the book, but I think that's fantastic that it's included in Kobo Plus. The Master and the Margarita, and it was the exact translation that I wanted, which is the Bergen and O'Connor translation. E.F. Benson's crime novels, because he has become one of my favourite authors, and his crime novels, some of them are on Kobo Plus. The World of Yesterday by Stefan Zweig, and Parade's End by Ford Madox Ford, which is a big classic. So I do make good use of Kobo Plus. It's not perfect, and much like Kindle Unlimited and Kindle Now, if you read a lot of classics and modern classics, you will find it full of kind of AI generated, kind of out of intellectual property versions that are just kind of like horrible slop versions of classics. That is the same with Kindle, and unfortunately it's the same with Kobo as well. I always steer well clear of those because usually they're riddled with kind of errors. Also have the Kobo VIP membership, which you pay £6 a year for, and then you get a discount on each of the books that you buy. And you also get, I think, is it Kobo Super Points, which do kind of add up over time. I recently bought The Shell Seekers by Rosamund Pilcher, a book that I read earlier this month with the points that I've accumulated. So if you're in the UK, think of it as like a ebook version of a Waterstone stamp card. £6 a year at the price of a coffee. I probably will renew that. And actually with the Shell Seekers, it's kind of paid for itself because I did really want to read that. A downside to the Kobo store, I did start with the Kobo Plus Reader and audiobook subscription. I really don't think that their Plus audiobook subscription is worth it. I think I had it for 2 months and I didn't find a single audiobook version that I wanted to listen to. They also have a lot of really older versions of audiobooks that just haven't really stood up to the test of time. And actually, I don't really recommend their platform as a way to get audiobooks at all. I know Amazon is far from perfect, and I'm sure Kobo kind of will have flaws too, but the Amazon credit system in Audible is a much better way to buy audiobooks. On the Kobo platform, they charge the monetary cost of each audiobook. So as an example, I pay £8.99 currently to Audible. I get 1 credit a month, and then I'm in their Premium Plus catalogue, so I get a lot of classics for free. The audiobook that I'm listening to now, Parade's End by Ford Madox Ford, 1 credit, so like £8.99. On the Kobo store, it's £16.99 for the book. One of the other audiobooks I listened to recently, Dorothy Wordsworth's Grasmere Journal, which is 7 hours, whereas Parade's End is 40 hours, is still £16.99. You would end up spending so much more money if you buy your audiobooks through Kobo that I really would struggle to recommend that to anybody. And at the rate I go through audiobooks, that would like literally bankrupt me. So yeah, I don't recommend it for their audiobooks. I was kind of hoping, because I was moving away from Amazon, between Kobo and BorrowBox, which I use from my library in Cumberland, that I would be able to give up my Audible subscription. That's not happening because the Kobo audiobook service is just not very good. Right, let's move on to the availability of titles. And unfortunately, this is a con for Kobo. Before I bought my Kobo, I listened to quite a lot of reviews who said that they hadn't had any problems with availability of titles. I don't know if it's just me or if it's the type of books that I like to read, but I have had a few issues to the point now where I don't trust that the titles that I want will be available on Kobo. In June, I read The Mare by Angharad Hampshire. This was shortlisted for the Walter Scott Prize for historical fiction. You know, it wasn't a bestseller, but it was definitely generating attention. I had to buy the paperback of this because this isn't available on the Kobo store. It wasn't back in May when I first looked, in June when I read it, and it's still not available now. I just find that so bizarre and really just a poor showing. I'm sure if I were to ask Kobo, they'd say something it's about kind of rights or like a deal with the publisher, but I think that's pretty poor. And not being able to get hold of titles is a little bit of an issue. In June, I went to Mallorca in Spain and I wanted to read The Tortoise and the Hare by Elizabeth Jenkins, but I didn't want to take my like beautiful hardback Virago Modern Classic edition because I knew I'd like drop it in the pool or get it ruined on the beach and like spill something over it and it'd get battered in my bag. So I thought, oh, I'll just download an ebook of it and read it on my Kobo. It's not available either. Those are the two that stand out the most to me because I found it really irritating, but it's not a rare occurrence on Kobo. I do have problems getting hold of titles, especially like 20th century classics that are a little bit less well known, but even like contemporary titles that are being published now, which I just don't understand at all. I also have problems getting hold of the British Library crime classics. They're the reissued crime novels from the British Library. Some of the titles are on the Kobo store and they're in Kobo Plus, so fantastic because I get to read them for kind of, not for free because I paid the £8.99, but they are there and it's great. Some of them are not there at all and it is like just a little bit of an irritation. That's the one, for me, the one real downside to Kobo. And I got into the habit of, whenever I couldn't find it on Kobo, of checking to see if Amazon have an ebook version. And of course they do every single time. And I can't say in the plus like 10, 12 years I've had a Kindle, I can ever remember not being able to get hold of a title. It must have happened at some point, but I genuinely can't remember that ever happening. And so that is a big drawback for me. What it means is that I end up buying paperback versions of books I like otherwise wouldn't do. Of course, I check to see if Libby have them. If Libby don't have them and Kobo don't have them, it forces me into buying the paperback, and I, especially on untried and untested new to me authors, I always prefer getting the digital copy. That's a system that I find really works because then I don't invest my money in books that I don't end up liking. But Kobo does make that a little bit trickier. If you're reading like new publications and really popular titles, I don't think you're going to have any trouble at all. But if you're reading like classics, modern classics, kind of fallen out of favour titles, you may well run into this issue. Right, last up is Libby integration. This is one of the main reasons why I wanted to get a Kobo. If I can get a book from the library through Libby, I always will do. And honestly, the Libby integration is seamless. It works through the e-reader. I still use the Libby app on my iPad, so I will check out a book, place a book on hold, and then all you have to do is sync my Kobo if it hasn't already synced. It works perfectly, so whoever's designed that, like, top marks, because it is a great system. I also really love on the Kobo, when you're looking at the books in the store, it will tell you if your library has a copy, and it's so nice to just feel like you're not constantly being fleeced or like pushed to buy new things. Like I said earlier, that's one of my favorite things about the Kobo. So like, yeah, I love that about them. Recently, my library had a copy of The Siege by Helen Dunmore. Like I said, borrowed that, worked perfectly. When your library has the book, it is the perfect system. Whereas with Kindle, I did have Libby. I never used it though because getting the books onto the Kindle was such a massive faff. So this is the perfect system for borrowing books from the library. I don't generally tend to borrow physical books. I'm much more of like a Libby person. However, there is a but, and it's not Kobo's fault, but it does affect how much I use Libby. This may well just be a UK thing, but my library's Libby catalogue just isn't very good. And when I say my library, I have intentionally joined the library in a major city which I go to for work, because they should have a better selection. But even the library of a UK major city, what's available is very patchy. Like recently I wanted to borrow Mansfield Park. I have a physical copy. I just wanted to read it on my e-reader because it's my next Jane Austen to get to for this year. They didn't have a copy of Mansfield Park. They don't, for example, have Charles Dickens' back catalogue. I also wanted to borrow a book on Russian history before I read some Russian classics later on in the year. Nothing, even when that's really relevant to contemporary politics. It's just so disappointing. That is a different conversation. And obviously, Kobo can't affect that, but it does have a big impact on me not using Kobo's best feature as much as I would like to, and as much as I hoped I would. It's also worth knowing that if you're in the UK, I don't know about the rest of the world, an awful lot of libraries are moving from Libby to BorrowBox. BorrowBox have an amazing audiobook selection. Like I use it all the time, but if they do that, it's as much as a faff as getting books on BorrowBox onto your Kobo as it is getting books from Libby onto your Kindle. There is the workaround on Libby, which is to join more than one library. I have joined more than one library. I think I've joined like 3, which all of which I have connections to. But the downside to that is that the Kobo will only allow you to sync to one library. There are whole like Reddit kind of like threads on how to get it to sync to multiple libraries, so you can have all of the books from those libraries on your Kobo. I've never got that to work, and I've spent hours trying to make it work. I don't know if that's because I'm in the UK and not in the US, but again, that is a downside to the Kobo and Libby. Libby allows you to join more than one library, and the library policies allow you to do that if you work, for example, in a different city. But Kobo will only let you sync to one library. If they could change that feature, that would really help. Right, that's the last thing I wanted to mention before I like wrap this up. And I do hope it's been helpful if you're thinking of like buying one or getting it as a gift for someone. If someone bought me a Libra Colour, I would have been absolutely delighted. So I guess I wanted to say a couple of things. If I could go back in time, I would still buy my Libra Colour. I wouldn't buy the stylus, but I would still buy the colour version, and I would still buy Kobo. I think that they're a better company currently to support than Amazon. I like the library integration. It has flaws. It's a really like intuitive, easy to use e-reader. I like the annotation, and I like the colour version as well. So I do recommend it, but it's not perfect. To be honest though, I think you would struggle to find the perfect e-reader anywhere. They're all going to have slight drawbacks. And I do read from my Kobo basically on a daily basis. So that is it for today's video. Thank you so much if you made it this far. And if you're thinking about getting a Kobo, I hope that this has helped, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye now.